For 40 years his face was everywhere. The wild grin, the dark glasses, the seat right next to the basketball court. He played the Joker. He played the man losing his mind in the snow. He won awards, he scared people, and he made them laugh, sometimes all in the same breath. And then one day, he was simply gone. No goodbye, no final wave. Jack Nicholson, one of the most famous actors who ever lived, just stopped appearing. Many people think they know why. They heard he was sick. They heard his mind was failing. But the truth behind his quiet life is very different from what the rumors say. To really understand why we never see him anymore, we have to go back to a phone call he received in 1974. A stranger on the line. A few simple words. And a secret that had been hidden from him for 37 years. That single moment tells you almost everything about the kind of man he is, and about the choice he would make many years later to walk away from fame on his own terms. Long before the fame and the famous grin, he was just a boy with very little. Jack Nicholson was born on the 22nd of April, 1937 in Neptune City, a small town in New Jersey. He grew up believing that a woman named Ethel May was his mother. He also grew up believing that a young woman named June was his older sister. His home was modest and his father was mostly absent, so the family did the best it could with what little it had. At 17 years old, Jack made a big decision. June had moved to the other side of the country to chase a life in show business, and since she felt like his only close family, he followed her all the way to Los Angeles. He did not arrive as a star. He started at the very bottom. His first job in the film world was working as an office assistant in the cartoon department of a movie studio, sorting papers and running errands. He watched that whole industry from its lowest step, and he quietly began to dream that one day he might stand on a much higher one. Almost no one who passed him in those hallways could have guessed they were looking at a future legend. He had no money, no famous name, and no clear path. Only a quiet hope that simply refused to die. From that bottom step, his climb was slow and full of rejection. For years, he acted in cheap, forgettable films that very few people ever watched. But Jack kept going. And in 1969, a small film called Easy Rider finally changed everything. Suddenly, people noticed this strange, sharp, fearless actor who did not look or sound like a typical movie star. More great roles followed in films like Chinatown, and in 1975 he won his first Academy Award for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Audiences loved him because he felt real. He played the outsider, the rebel, the man who refused to follow the rules, and somehow that made millions of ordinary people feel seen. Across his long life in film, he would earn 12 Academy Award nominations, which is still a record for a male actor. And he would win 3 times. He became one of the biggest names the movie world had ever produced. Have you ever watched a Jack Nicholson film that you still remember today? And if so, which one stayed with you the most? Tell me in the comments below. While the world was falling in love with him on screen, a shocking truth about his own life was still hidden from him. In 1974, just as his film Chinatown was about to reach theaters, a reporter made a phone call to check some strange facts he had uncovered. What he said changed everything. The woman Jack had always called his sister June was in truth his real mother. And the woman who had raised him as her son, Ethel May, was actually his grandmother. June had become pregnant very young, and to protect the family from shame in those days, they kept the truth buried for almost 40 years. The hardest part was the timing. By the time Jack learned all of this, both women had already passed away, so he could never ask them why. Yet, he did not break down. He later called the news dramatic rather than painful, and he said something that reveals his whole character. He said he was very impressed by their ability to keep the secret. Even faced with the biggest shock of his life, Jack stayed calm and in control of himself. Imagine learning at the peak of your fame that the people closest to you had quietly hidden who you truly were. He had spent 37 long years calling his own mother by the wrong name, and never once suspected the truth. That same quiet strength followed him into the biggest years of his career. He became the Joker in Batman in 1989. He delivered the famous courtroom shout in A Few Good Men. He sat in his usual seat at Los Angeles Lakers basketball games so often that fans simply expected to see him there. He seemed permanent, like he would never leave. But in December 2010 came a film called How Do You Know? It failed badly with both critics and audiences, and very few people realized at the time that it would become his final movie. He never stood up and announced that he was retiring. Instead, he simply slowed down. He almost returned for a film in 2014, and he agreed to another project around 2017 before quietly stepping away from it. 1 year passed, then another, and the gaps grew longer. Slowly, without any big moment to mark it, the most famous face in Hollywood faded from the screen. There was no dramatic exit and no final speech. The man who had filled cinemas for half a century chose, little by little, to step out of the spotlight he had owned for so long. Nobody knew that a quiet little film in 2010 would turn out to be the last time the world ever saw him act. One by one, the cameras stopped finding him, and the silence around him slowly became permanent. As the years of silence grew, people naturally began to ask what had gone wrong. In 2013, a report claimed that Jack had secretly retired because of memory loss. It suggested that at 76, he could no longer remember his lines, and the claim spread across the world within days. Fans everywhere felt sad, believing one of the greatest actors alive was quietly fading away in poor health. But the claim simply was not true. People close to Jack quickly said the report was false. The memory loss claim was openly called 100% false, and Jack himself pushed back in interviews, making it clear that his mind was sharp and his health was fine. He was not hiding away because he was sick. He was not lost or confused. The sad picture that the rumor painted had very little to do with the real man living his life in the hills of Los Angeles. So if the reason was not illness, then what was it? Do you think a famous person has the right to disappear from public life without ever explaining why? Share your honest opinion in the comments below. The real reason is quieter and far more surprising than any illness. Jack Nicholson stopped acting mostly because he simply wanted to. He lost the strong drive to keep working, and to his own surprise, he found that he did not miss it at all. In his own words, he is not a driven man, and he once admitted that he honestly likes not working. A close friend explained it in the simplest way possible, saying that Jack just wants to be quiet and live life on his own terms. There was even a touch of pride in it, because everyone told him he could never stop, and he proved them all wrong. Today, at 88 years old, he still lives in the same home he bought back in 1975. In 2021, he returned to a Lakers game beside his son. And in 2025, he surprised everyone with a brief appearance on a major television special. So we do not see him because he chose peace over fame. He spent his whole life controlling his own path. And in the end, he simply decided that the quiet life was the one he wanted most. In the end, the man who could have anything chose the one thing money can never buy, which is true peace. And maybe that is the bravest choice of all, to walk away while everyone still wants you to stay.